Today I'm going to have a talk with Hamill. Pete is the author of the book Embodied Leadership. It's about the somatic approach to developing your leadership. I found it a really interesting read, and in the interview he will cover a few of the topics he describes in his book. And in the book he gives a lot of insights and a lot of practical tips and tools to develop your own leadership style. I hope you will enjoy the interview, and it will give you a lot of new insights like it has been given me. In part one of your book, you really explore the philosophical questions and the neuroscience concerning behavior.
Yeah.
You were talking about that a little bit in your talk about the embodied leadership. What really stood out for me in that part was your emphasis on the somatic markers.
Yes.
And maybe you can explain a little bit more about what these somatic markers are and how, in your opinion, they relate to leadership.
Yeah. So, somatic markers is a way of thinking about kind of our personality in some respects. So, part of what happens for us, I'll diverge a little bit here. You could maybe, if you're technical enough, you could track down this video and actually put it in the middle of this video. But there's a YouTube video with, it's from a candid camera experiment from the 1960s.
Yeah.
And it's quite a famous experiment. It was originally done by Solomon Asch, who was a social psychologist, and then Candid Camera turned it into a piece of comedy. And what you have is some people in a lift, and there's kind of the victim of the study, if you like, standing in the lift, facing the front as you would normally do when you get into a lift. And then 3 other people or 4 other people enter the lift and who are actors and who stand facing the back wall of the lift or the side wall. And what you see is that the people in the lift adapt. And that they're adapting to conform inside of that situation. And that's fascinating from a social psychology piece around conformity and group behavior. But what I'm particularly interested in that is what you see, especially with one of the particular characters, is you see their struggle with it.
Yeah.
And the sheer discomfort that they feel facing a different way than everybody else. The real discomfort. And they know rationally that turning around and facing the back of the lift is a silly thing to do. Yet they end up doing it because they feel so viscerally uncomfortable standing in a different way. Now, that to me is the bit that I'm interested in, because what we see inside of that is we see some who to our disc. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Yeah. But it's
okay. Sorry. Yeah. It froze on my end, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So we see somebody in that situation who is viscerally uncomfortable and is responding to the situation in order to make themselves more comfortable. A very, very simple thing. Just like when you have an itch and you scratch that itch, and sometimes you scratch it before you've even been aware that you had it. You know, we do that sometimes. We find ourselves scratching something like, oh, that's interesting. Wasn't even aware that the itch actually was there, but I've already scratched it.
Yeah.
So what happens is we start to see that pre-consciously, before it's conscious, we're aware of being uncomfortable, and we're already doing something to make ourselves comfortable as human beings.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we do. Now, that actually is quite a profound statement about all human behavior. A lot of human behavior is we find ourselves in a situation where we're uncomfortable and we're responding already to make ourselves more comfortable. So take an example, networking event. You know, it's a kind of situation that for a lot of people, not everybody, it's a situation that is to some degree a discomforting situation. And we see people playing out certain behaviors in response to that. Some people will kind of stand around the edge with their BlackBerry. I've got some really important emails which I've just got to look at while they kind of scope it out and check whether or not it's safe and who can I engage with and all of that sort of stuff. Other people will charge into the center and kind of start to take control of things and start kind of, going to the center of attention in the room and all of that sort of stuff. And you see patterns, and it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just we are acting in those moments to make ourselves more comfortable, to kind of feel at some level viscerally more comfortable by dealing with that discomfort. So that we see that as a driver of human behavior. Now, what we know from the way our history, and we know from you talk about the somatic marker. Somatic marker theory comes from Antonio Damasio and his work. Is that when we encounter a situation, what our kind of cognition does, not at a conscious level, but pre-conscious, is it starts to kind of look for what is this similar to? And then we start to act according to how similar it is. And if we kind of sense there's some kind of threat, there's some kind of danger in this situation, what will happen is that the somatic markers will start to make us feel uncomfortable, so that we then start to take action to make ourselves more comfortable. Yeah. So if you think about a time when you were really embarrassed, we probably all have those moments in our history, and we think about that, just thinking about it will probably already have the sense for you of feeling something below the chin of that embarrassment. You start to feel it again. That's a somatic marker. And when you go back into a situation which has some similarities to that, what you don't have time to do is to sit and analyze what's similar about this situation to the past situation. What's different about it? How might I act? What might I not do? What are the different options that are available to me? Who else is here? Etc. etc. We don't have time to do that. That would take too much time for our cognition to go through that process. So what it does is it goes, whoa, this is a similar situation to when you were in before, by making you feel the feelings, the discomfort of the embarrassment that you felt previously. And you feel that again, that resonance. And then you start taking action to make yourself more comfortable. Maybe by making yourself smaller, by moving to the side of the room, by going in and trying to take charge. Whatever it is, whatever your pattern of behavior is, in order to make yourself more comfortable. Now, what's interesting about that, it's not a good or bad. It's not about that one of those responses is better than the other. It's not about that. What's interesting about that is when you're doing that, you're not acting from free will. You're acting from your history, your conditioning. And there's a lot of psychologists in neuroscience who are actively out there doing experiments to try to prove that we as human beings do not have free will, which is a really radical, unpleasant concept when you think about our whole system of criminal justice, personal responsibility, etc., etc. But the reason that they can do this is that because there's so much evidence that comes from experiments that show a lot of human behavior is not free will. And why is it not free will? Well, my argument, my explanation for this is that if we see and we understand somatic markers, we see that a lot of our behavior isn't free will, that it's replaying history, and it's replaying out of that sense of discomfort. If we understand that, then we're in a slightly different place around, so leadership. If I'm really going to be the person who takes that risks and stands up, and maybe other people are going to say, who the hell is that person to whatever, and I'm going to do something different than I've historically done before, if I'm going to achieve an embodied level of learning, which is about the ability to do something different than I've done before, then we're in a conversation about how do we start to work with and shift those somatic markers. And we have to understand those somatic markers, and we have to cultivate free will. We have to cultivate the ability to, in those moments, do something different than we have historically done, and to be able to choose our response in those moments. And really, the root for me of all of the embodied leadership work is largely around cultivating our ability to take genuine, responsible choices, which is a hard sell because most people think that they do take choices. But actually, if you analyze it, all of those choices are conditioned. and they're not genuine open choices. And so by genuine open choices, what I mean is that something that's not driven by our past, by our history, by trying to make ourselves more comfortable in the moment, but by actually standing back and going, what am I committed to here? What's important to me? And therefore, what's the best course of action, even if I have to feel uncomfortable while doing it?
Yeah.